Okay, 5 things that I've learned about coffee roasting over the past couple years. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list. These are just a few things that were on my mind right now that I thought I'd kick down to you guys. Now, different people may have had different experiences regarding these things, but these are my experiences, and that's all I can comment on. Number 1, there's a direct correlation between the time or the length of your roasts and how much acidity your coffee will have. Roasts that are faster will have way more acidity than roasts that are longer, even at the same temperature, even at different temperatures. Sometimes you'll have coffee that's roasted really quickly, ending at a higher temperature, that has more acidity than something that's roasted quite a bit longer, even if that longer roast has a lower drop temperature. So if I want to bring out acidity in coffee, I'll use a relatively high charge temperature, hit it with a lot of heat right up front, and really make that roast time as short as I reasonably can. If I want to tame that acidity a little bit, subdue it, I'll use a relatively low charge temp, hit it with less heat up front, and try to draw that roast out a little bit longer. Some people will say that the hotter your finish temp or your drop temp is, the lower the acidity is going to be. So if you want coffee with less acidity, you just take it hotter, i.e. darker. I actually haven't seen this. I've seen more of a correlation between time than actual end temperature. Number 2, finish temps or end temps are a really bad indicator of how quote unquote dark a coffee might be. This ties back to number 1 in a way. If you have 2 different roasts, same batch size, and let's say your end temp on both of them was 408 degrees, and one of them took 10 minutes, and the other one took 13 minutes, the one that took 13 minutes is going to taste darker roasted than the one that took 10 minutes. This is because that even though the temperatures were the same, the one that took longer has more area under the curve. Now this makes sense, and we know this intuitively, but a lot of people talk about drop temps or end temps as the be-all and end-all of roasting. How dark is it? Oh, I took it to 410. It doesn't really make any sense to refer to things in that way. Another note regarding finish temps, it's almost impossible to compare finish temps between different roasters. If you're using a different probe, you might be getting a different reading. If your temp probe's in a different location, you might have a totally different baseline, and that's okay. It's just something to be aware of. Number 3, development percentage is important, but it isn't everything. Development percentage is the time in between first crack and the drop or the finish of the roast as a percentage of the entire roast, like this. Now, just as your end temperature isn't really a great indicator of how dark your roast is, development percentage by itself doesn't really tell you too much about a roast either, i.e. roasts of different lengths, different end temperatures, even if they have similar development percentages, aren't going to taste the same. Again, this is something that most of us know intuitively, but we throw around these percentages so much as if they operate in a vacuum and mean anything without all the additional data. The common development percentage range that's accepted as good in specialty coffee is currently 20 to 25%. These aren't the ranges that I prefer. My ranges are a little bit lower, and I like anywhere from 18 to 22%. Now in context, what this looks like is 18 to 20% for a single origin coffee that I want to have decent acidity, using about a 12-pound batch on a 12-kilo roaster. If I'm going for espresso, generally I land in that 20 to 22% range with a little bit of a longer roast, same batch size, same roaster. The other wild card with development percentages is naturally processed coffees. When we're running some naturals that we do for espresso, those will have a really low development percentage, sometimes 14 or 16% with a longer roast, but anything higher than that, development percentage wise, starts to taste roasty at the lengths that we want to kind of calm that acidity down. So while sure you could achieve that 20 to 25% with those coffees at that roast time, it won't taste good, or at least it doesn't taste what I want it to taste like. Number 4, have a charging ritual. Thermal integrity plays a big role in what's going to happen inside your coffee roaster. Every time you drop a batch, you want to do a few things to retain your thermal integrity, or at least make that thermal integrity consistent. Every time I drop a batch, I'll set the burner back to the exact same point. Generally, it's as low as I can make it go without the flame going out, so 0.2 water columns. On the workflow side of things, I'll have everything already prepped out for the next batch because I want that time in between batches to be as consistent as possible from batch to batch. If you wait 2 minutes in between one batch and 10 minutes in between another batch just because you got caught up doing something, the thermal integrity of your roaster has changed, and you're probably gonna get some wild card things happening. Also, every time I get that roaster to the charge temp I want it at, I'll get there in the same way. So I'll drop the burner really low from the previous batch and wait for the temperature to fall past through the charge temp that I actually want. Then I'll turn the burner up just a teeny bit so that that temp comes back up as slowly as it possibly can, and then once it hits that charge temp, then I'll go. So I'll always do it on the upswing. I don't do it on the downswing. You could totally do it on the downswing if you do it that way every time. The point is to make it consistent. Don't catch it on the downswing one time and go from there. and then catch it on the upswing the next time and go from there. It's all about consistency. You really want to be as delicate with your burners as you can when you're setting up your charge temp, because you don't want to blow through that point that you're trying to hit. If you're trying to hit 400-degree charge and your roaster's running at just like 10 degrees per second and it's just going up in temperature like a maniac, you're not really hitting that 400-degree charge. You're hitting somewhere in some window that's close to that, but maybe not right on. And again, probes don't tell the whole story. There's a lot more to what's going on than just the temperature of the air inside your drum that the probe's reading. So having a consistent ritual that you do after every batch drop to get your charge set up for the next batch will help ensure quality consistency for the entire roast day. And number 5, you can actually learn quite a bit about what went on in the roast by chewing on your beans. I was kind of skeptical about this one at first. I was like, eh, but then the more I did it, the more the things that I was tasting when I was crunching beans seemed to line up with what I'd taste in the cup after I brewed the coffee. So if you chew on the bean and it's bright, lively, and it snaps, it's a good indicator that you're gonna have a lot of acidity in that coffee, or that roast has a lot of acidity. If it's dull and subdued, you'll probably get a dull and subdued cup. If it tastes dry and chalky, you maybe baked it out a little bit. Of course, you have to sample more than one bean because you could grab just one weird one, but if you crunch on 4 or 5 beans out of any given roast, you have a pretty good idea of what went on and what that coffee is gonna taste like. I remember hearing a story of a farmer who said that the #1 way he could tell quality of his coffee while it was growing wasn't by cupping it after it was roasted, but was by walking around and picking cherries off the tree and eating them. And to me, this is kind of the same thing. Yeah, this is not how we're gonna ingest this coffee, but it seems to really work out. So chew on your beans, see what you think. This is actually kind of a problem for me if I'm roasting late at night and I'll just keep crunching beans, and by the time the shift's over, I've probably ate the equivalent of like 2 cups of coffee and I'm just super jacked all night, can't sleep. Ultra bummer. So those are just a few things that were on my mind. Again, this list isn't exhaustive, and it's really important to know that none of these things function in a vacuum. And the best way to roast consistently and well is by taking multiple data points from multiple things and seeing how those all work as a system, and then make adjustments based on that, and not just, oh, this thing's 17%, it's not gonna work. As always, trust your taste buds. These are the things that work for me and the style of coffee that I wanna drink. If you're doing something completely different, but your coffee tastes awesome, keep doing what you're doing. More power to you. Is that it? I think that might be it, at least for right now. I'm gonna go run around Capitola. It's freaking psychotic over here.